Hi guys, it's Mojola Olua here, and I'm really thrilled to be here today. I'm selling off my book stash, for several reasons, and I think the most important reason is that I want these books to express their full potential, and that's why I want to pass, because I've read them, most of them, practically all of these books, and more, because this is batch one of my stash. So I'm selling it because I want them to go to the right hands where other people can read and get the value. But I only want to give it to people who know the value of books. That's why I'm not giving it out. I'm selling them, and so far so good. I've sold almost 20 copies. 20, and so far so good. I've sold about 20 of my books already. So some of them are no longer here because those who bought them are taking them away. I give out 3 because the person showed a passionate interest in reading, and they appealed to me to actually give them out. So I said, okay, pick any 3 you want. They picked America the America by J.P. Clark. It's a bulky book. It's non-fiction, and it's quite interesting. It's about the life of J.P. Clark, when he was outside Nigeria on a scholarship. And then I gave them Route 234. Route 234 is a collection of travel stories by Nigerian writers. Read it, it's very interesting, and it's a book that takes you on several trips across the world, through the eye of different Nigerian writers like Belu Awofeso, like Molara Wood, and a host of others. And I gave them The Government Inspector by Nikolai Gogol. The Government Inspector is a very interesting story of how, in a town where I think it's a Russian town. I read several years ago, a Russian town where, there was a lot of corruption going on, especially in the civil service, and then they heard that a government inspector will be coming from the capital to inspect what they've been doing and all of that. And then, they were preparing to do some Windows service, and then someone came and they served the person all the Windows service under the false belief that that person was the government inspector. And after they were almost exhausted, from eye service and all the window dressing, the real government inspector came. There's a Yoruba adaptation. I think it's Yepa Shula Rainbow. I have not read it, but I have watched the movie adaptation by Tunde Kilani titled Yepa. I reviewed it. It's online. If you Google Mojola Olua Yepa, or you say Mojola Olua Mofuluwa Yepa, something like that, it will bring out my review of Yepa by Tunde Kilani. So these are some books that I'm still selling. Almost half of this has been paid for already, just awaiting delivery. And I believe that as time goes on, as the days go by, some of them are even law books, but I'm going to be showing you all the books and saying a word or two about it, for my own keepsake, and so that you can take away whatever you want to take away from this video. Thank you. And so that you can take away whatever you want to take away from this video. Thank you for watching. I've reviewed most of the books too. So I used to review books a lot back in the days. These days, I'm trying to get that moment or momentum back, to review the books that I've read, because I've read some books that I've not reviewed, and it's like a necessity placed on me that when I read a book, I review it. That way, I give other people an insight into what they are to expect if they ever read the book, or I create a discussion. When someone has also read the book and they see my review, they are able to compare and contrast. Is this what I took away from the book, and all of that. So I'm a very, very passionate book reader, book lover, if I do say so myself. So let's go right into it. I just wanted to make this video so that after I've sold all these books off, I will not be over missing them. Of course, the memories are with me of the books that I've read, the lessons I've learned from them, the conversations that I've started or joined over the years on these books, and that I will still join. You can't take that away from me. You can't take the memory of these books away from me. But as they depart, as I send them off to their new owners, I just want to talk about them, just a little bit more. On top of this list today, we have this book, Julius Caesar. I like pronouncing it in the original Latin. It's Julius Caesar. So this is Julius Caesar. It's an abridged version for children. I think there was Julius Caesar and Macbeth. My dad bought me those 2 books, several years ago. So you already know the story of Julius Caesar, how they say ambition killed Caesar. So he won some wars, then some of his generals plotted against him. His wife warned him, beware the Ides of March, but he dismissed it as an old wife's fable, encouraged by another general, and then he was killed on the Ides of March. And then, the ghost of Julius Caesar kept on pursuing all those who had a hand in his death. That's where the famous quote comes from, "Et tu, Brute," and "you too, Brutus." That is Brutus that he trusted, that he thought was his friend, and his ally also conspired against him and also killed him, pierced him with a sword. So, Julius Caesar. It's by William Shakespeare. It's a classic. This is a children's version. The Old Man and the Medal. The Old Man and the Medal. The Old Medal and the Medal is an African story. It's in the African Writers series. The African Writers series is a very beautiful series. I read a lot of books on that series, when I was a child. My parents' copies, my own copies that were purchased for me and all of that. So this is one of them, The Old Man and the Medal. It's about an old man who was told by the colonial government that he was going to receive a medal for his meritorious service, like for things he had done, for the colonial government and, for the church and all of that. And then the things that happened leading up to the day that he was to receive the medal, the day he was to receive the medal, he found out that eventually the white man did not really think much of him, and despite the fact that he was the medal winner on that day, he was eventually arrested. He drank too much, he found himself in some situation, and then he was arrested. And the fact that he was the person, the medalist, was not even enough to save him from, the humiliation and embarrassment, by the white man, even on his day of glory. So The Old Man and the Medal, very interesting book. And then we have Crippled Eagle here. Crippled Eagle is a very interesting book in the sense that what I expected was not what I found in the book. So that's all I'm going to say. But yeah, it is. It's a 2016 print. I think it's a new book. So there. This is Great Stories in Modern English. It contains Merchant of Venice and A Midsummer Night's Dream. So it contains those two Shakespeare stories, in a simplified outlay that makes it very easy for you to read it if you want to read it. So it's a book. It's interesting. It's by Africana First Publications. This is Sam Adeyemi's Success is Who You Are. It's a very interesting book. It's a book that addresses your mind. If you read it, it talks about how to think, how to develop ideas, and how ideas rule the world. I think it's very similar to Ideas Rule the World, but it's a book that will inspire you to, think about what you have in your hand, your ability, and how, your thought process can actually shape your progress in life. Very interesting book. John Maxwell's The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. I've had it for about 2 years, but I haven't read it. I'm not really much into self-help and, all these kind of books, but I might read it and I might sell it. So, here. Sizwe Bansi is dead. I think I read this book at least twice growing up. It's a very interesting book. It's about the apartheid in South Africa and how, locals needed a passport, so to speak, an identity card, so to speak, to move around their own country. So you couldn't be in some places in South Africa, some parts that were delineated for the whites without an ID. So one day there was a man he found someone else's passport lying on the floor, so he took it and he used it. So he started using it and he started bearing the name. So he himself assumed the position or the status of a dead person because he now had the identity of the person that had the ID card. So Sizwe Bansi is dead. It's a very interesting book. It mirrors the apartheid in South Africa, and it's really very hilarious too. Very, very hilarious. So there it is. It's a short read, about 44 pages, and it's a drama. It's a drama, so very interesting. Sizwe Bansi is dead. Fallen Angels by Walter D. Myers is a very interesting book about soldiers that die on the battlefield, for the United States and all of that. So I read this book about maybe 5-6 years ago. So and I found it very interesting, I believe, when I read it. So can't remember most of it now, but it's very interesting. You should read it. This is Friday Night Lights by H.G. Bissinger. Unfortunately, I could not finish reading this book. It was just drab for me, drab. But I think it's a great read because I learned that it's been adapted into a movie, and it's about sports. So I'm not really into sports as such. So sport movies or sport books don't really, I don't really, sport movies and sport books don't really excite me, so to speak. But I believe whoever has this, if I'm selling it, whoever has this, if they love sports, they will be able to read it and it will be interesting for them. So that, you think that's good? Jesse is like an autobiography. It was very interesting when I read it. I know it was about the life of a minister. He's growing up and how he became who he was. So I hope that whoever gets it finds it interesting as well. Taming the Tiger. I love this book. This is one of the books that I saved up my pocket money to buy in secondary school. It's an autobiography of a former Kung Fu fighter, former world champion, Kung Fu world champion who gave his life to Jesus. So he talks about his Kung Fu years, his winnings, his life, and how he found Jesus, how he got married. There's a portion of it where I can never forget. I read it over 10 years ago, but I still remember that portion where he talked about when he went to his father and his parents-in-law to stay for a weekend or so, when he was just meeting the family. And then his father-in-law came into the room and he eventually assumed a Kung Fu position because he thought he was being attacked before he realized that it was his father-in-law. So Old Habits Die Hard. It's a very interesting book. It's a book for you to read and celebrate what Christ can do in the life of a man who turns to him. So Tony Anthony, at the time I traced the author to Facebook, so I believe he's still alive and well, bouncing in the Lord. So it's a very interesting book. Whoever gets it is going to enjoy it. I enjoy autobiographies and memoirs a lot. I do not own many of the ones that I've read, but the ones that I own, I cherish them. And I'm passing the cherishment, on to whoever gets this. Animal Farm! Make some noise for Animal Farm by George Orwell. This book is a classic and you should know if you're into books or politics. And even if you're not, everybody knows Animal Farm because at one point in time or the other, you've probably said in your life that all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. That quote is from this book, Animal Farm. So I think I bought it in 2012 or 2013. So it's a very short read, but it's very didactic and very interesting. Very interesting. Animal Farm. Tempest by William Shakespeare. I read this book in secondary school. So William Shakespeare, The Tempest. It's a very interesting book. Although this version is in Old English, so it might be difficult for you to read it if you're not into Old English text and all. But it's a very interesting book. The Tempest is a classic. Whoever gets it, is getting a classic. And this is a New Swan Longman copy. So very dear to my heart. If you get it, I'm passing the endearment to you. Atelewo Pelebe. I don't think I'm selling this because I have poems published in it. I'm not going to sell my anthologies that have my poems in them. I bought this in I think 2017 or 2018. So this is my first Yoruba collection of poems that I bought with my own money. So my own submissions are also in it. So it's published by Atelewo is an initiative by Ibrahim, my very good friend, and some other people, and they are vanguards and promoters of Yoruba language. I am also a promoter of Yoruba language. I'm very particular. I'm very interested in the propagation of Yoruba language. So I have about 2 poems in this book. Let me even look for the poems. It's actually signed by Ibrahim to me. So I had this book shipped down from Asaba in 2018. I remember it. So they actually wrote my name as House of Livingstone. I think this is what I submitted, and this is Ibrahim's creativity. But here it is. So these are my two poems, Asonile Nomo and Ife. Asonile Nomo and Ife. Let me read Asonile Nomo to you. Ọmọ ẹni ìbájọ ni ẹni ìbáyọ̀, ọmọ ẹni ìbágbẹ̀kọ́, inú ẹni ìbádùn, ọmọ ẹni ìbágbọ́n, ọkàn ẹni ìbábalẹ̀. Wọ́n lọ́mọ rẹ̀ gọ̀, oníkóṣà máa kú. Kí ló tún yára pa ní bí àgbò? Èdò àjọmọ wa ó gbọ́n. Má fún wa ní mọ́mì ṣùdáì ìtìtì ọmọ nílé àná. Má fún wa ní mọ́mì ṣùdáì ìtìtì nílé àná ọmọ. Asọnilẹ́nu ọmọ oníbàjẹ́ bí ọwọ́ lefty. So oníbàjẹ́ bí ọwọ́ lefty. So mommy should I eat it is English translated into Yoruba, and they have the translation mommy should I eat it, and then be ọwọ́ lefty. So they have it. Ọwọ́ left refers to the left hand, qualifying the severity of madness. I actually sent this interpretation, and it was published alongside the poem. And then I have the second one, Ife. So it's a love poem. So I have those two. So I'm not selling this. I have another collection. Where's my second anthology? Carson's Think Big and Gifted Hands. I bought these books in secondary school. So Think Big, Gifted Hands. They are very interesting books. One is about the life. Both of them really about the life and the work of Dr. Ben Carson, a neurosurgeon, a foremost neurosurgeon in the United States, and his life, how he grew up. I was dull at first, and how he found Christ, how his mother's role in his life, how she was very pivotal, to his development and success, and how he got married, his work at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and his life and career generally. So they are very inspiring books. If you read this book as a kid or as an adult even, it will inspire you, bring out the best in you. It will help you think about your life and how you can be better, bring out your own potentials, and how nobody is without redemption, or condemned to being a dullard or a ne'er-do-well. So very interesting, very lovely books. Whoever gets these books is going to, whoever gets these two books is getting, a package of blessings. Olu Olagoke's The Incorruptible Joy. This is a classic in Nigeria. Olu Olagoke just died, I think, December last year, 2022. God rest his soul. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting book. I read it as a student, and then I taught it as a teacher. I was a teacher briefly, and before I went to law school, I was a teacher briefly, and then I taught this book to a class of GSS. Is it GSS 1 or GSS 2 boys now? So very interesting book. It's about a corrupt official who wanted bribe to give a young man looking for a job, and how the whole thing went down. So it's a book that satirizes the corruption that goes on in public systems and facilities and agencies and offices in Nigeria generally, and how each individual can stand up to corruption or fall in line, whichever one you choose. There are consequences. So very interesting book. Whoever gets this is getting a classic. Then I have Sons and Daughters. It's a very interesting Ghanaian book. It's talking about the dichotomy in generations, how parents think somehow and children think otherwise, and how they often clash in the family setting. So it's a very interesting book. It's a drama, and it's very sweet. Then I have Mother's Choice, the classic of the century. Mother's Choice it has a very special place in my heart. It's a very interesting book. I read Mother's Choice in GSS 1, and I still remember what I read in Mother's Choice. I think I reread it afterwards. Most of the books I read as a number of the classics that I read as a child, I've reread them about once or twice or even more. So Mother's Choice is one of those. I think I've read it again about twice or once. So it's about how the family had an only son, a rich family, and how the mother was very instrumental in spoiling the boy's life. They shipped him off abroad, and abroad he joined bad gang, and then he could not make anything much out of his life. It's a very interesting book. Very interesting book. I think one part that I can never forget is one of the boys, the bad boys that their son, befriended abroad was always called Cam, 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 until the end of the book when his own parents came from Nigeria and actually called him Kamaruddin. So I could never forget that point in the book. Like, how did you go from Kamaruddin to Cam? Just mirroring the different ways that people go to another place and try to, rebrand themselves. Although in this case, not in a good way. So that's Mother's Choice by Agbuareo and Sons and Daughters by J.C. DeGraft. Very interesting books. Another book by Walter D. Myers. It's called The Young Landlords. It's a very interesting book about the lives of some young people, living together in one building in a ghetto, and all the confusion and the many catastrophes, that accompany their life. Very interesting book. Then I have Odafe Atogun's Taduno Song. A very sweet book. Look at how beautiful it is. That I have to part with this book. It's as good as new, and I've read it at least once. I'm not sure if I read it twice. I think I only read it once. It's a very interesting book, and the author signed it for me. So it says to my friend Mojola Oluwa. I bought it in the Arts and Books Festival. So Taduno Song. So it's like an adaptation of Fela's life, because it talks about a musician's fight against power. A musician who through his songs was fighting against the bad government of his country. And of course, if you read it and you know the Nigerian story, you would know that this is an allusion to Fela Anikulapo Kuti, and how he was betrayed. This musician Taduno was betrayed in the end, and then it turned out that the masses that he was fighting for were not there in his day of need when the government turned on him, and it's just talking about, it's mirroring the very difficult life of freedom fighters generally. But Taduno had his song to fight with, and in the end, it was his song, his guitar, that remained with him even when all others deserted him. So very interesting book, Taduno Song by Odafe Atogun. This one is published by Wida Limited. Then I have Allah Is Not Obliged. It is a very sweet book. Parting with this book is very, very sentimental and emotional for me to an extent, but it has to go because the memory will stay with me. I cried and laughed a lot reading this book. It's about the intra-African wars, told through the eye of a child soldier. So what the full title is Allah Is Not Obliged to Be Fair About All the Things He Does Here on Earth. It just mirrors how some people were born into conflict and they had to take up arms for survival, and they had no choice in the matter. So Birahima was born in a war-torn country. His mother died, then an uncle came and took him to Liberia, and from there he kept on going from Africa. So this book talks about different African countries and the wars that were going on in them. There was a portion where they were talking about a country where they were cutting off people's arms, people's limbs, in conflict. Even after the end of that war, those people are never going to be the same again. But the author Amadi Kuruma tells it in a very hilarious way, so that you are able to laugh and to cry and to internalize and to empathize and to just put yourself in the shoes of Birahima most of the time and see what is going through. It's a very interesting book. Allah Is Not Obliged to Be Fair About the Things He Does in this world. I love this book. I really, really love this book. I really, really love this book. I've reviewed it, the reviews on my blog. It's a very interesting book, a very lovely book. It's a book that, most people, even though everyone should read. I will say that everyone should read The Alchemist. I don't have a copy of The Alchemist, but I've read it. It's a life-changing book. But I think most people should also read this book, especially if you can stomach the grim depiction of tragedies, war-inflicted tragedies. Very interesting book. Allah Is Not Obliged. Allah n'est pas obligé. That's the French version. I think this book was translated from French. So the translation makes it even funnier when you read it, But it's a very interesting book. Then I have Indigo by Molara Wood. Molara Wood. So this book was signed for me by Molara Wood herself. It says Mujola Oluwamofolua with all my best wishes. Molara. So it's a very interesting book published by Provincial Publishers. It's a collection of short stories, mostly about the lives of African women, and all the struggles and travels they go through. Some stories are tragedies, some are comedy, some are comedy tragedy. Mixed. There's a story about a woman looking for a child, going to look for a child. So it's a very interesting book by Molara Wood. It's a collection of short stories, about African women, African settings, African relationships, and what have you. At home and abroad, it mirrors the everyday struggles of human life. This book gave me a feeling, this book made me think about Pukua in A Woman in a Prime very much when I was reading it. So it's not the same, but it has some similar plots, in this book. It's a very interesting book. The stories are different, but they are similar, but they are not the same, and they're interesting. And they're interesting because they take you through everyday encounters and experiences. And so some you laugh, some you wonder why. Very interesting book, Molara Wood. I reviewed it, the reviews on my blog too. Then I have Yellow, 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 Yellow by Ken Agari. Yellow, Yellow is a story of Zulaefa, a young girl from a village who went to Port Harcourt in search of a better life and all the travels that she went through. It's a very good book. You should read it. Very interesting. It also mirrors life in the oil-rich southern part of the country, Nigeria. So very interesting. She had a Greek and Nigerian parentage, and she was trying to keep head above water in the big city of Port Harcourt. So very interesting book. I have a collection of poems. This is Symphony of Becoming by Ekodana Baseke. Then I also have A Harvest of Laughter. Then I also have A Harvest of Laughter by Remi Raji. Remi Raji is a professor at the University of Ibadan. Then I also have Village Voices by Niyi Oshundari. So these are 3 collection of poems. I'm selling them as well. So they are Nigerian authors, Nigerian poems. Very interesting. So they are Nigerian authors, Nigerian poems. Very interesting. Some of them I've read and tried to even appreciate, literary appreciation, of course. So very interesting. I have this book by Tim Laye and Jerry B. Jenkins, Left Behind. It's a series, so this is just one of the series. It's like a fictional account of what happens after the rapture. May God make us all rapturable. Then I have Echoes of Our Times, Another Place. I've probably read this book about 3 or 4 times already in this lifetime. It's a very interesting book. I think it contains about 3 to 4 stories about different settings. I remember Echoes of Our Times was about a very hard period in Nigeria economically. I always remember. So the last time I read this book, it's been years. It's been probably almost 8 years since I last read it, but I've read it about 4 times already in this lifetime because the books are just so sweet. So there's a portion of the first Echoes of Our Time stories where a man complains that the meat or the protein on his food was too small, and the wife took it, cut it into smaller pieces, brought it back for him, and said, now they are plenty. And there was the last story. There's a story about jaundice. It's like the writer is trying to do like an advocacy for jaundice, and now people thought that it was a gods inflicted epidemic in those days, and it was just because people did not have access to good or quality health care, and the baby had jaundice, but they thought the gods had afflicted the baby. And then there was a portion where a man had died, and then his 2 daughters had come back from abroad to mourn with their mother, and the Umuada. This is the book that gave me an insight into what Umuada is, and some of the untoward practices, in some parts of Igbo land, I suppose. I hope that things have changed now. But this is the book that provided an insight into the harmful, mourning practices in some parts of Igbo land, and how the children brought a gun, they shot a gun into the air. When the mothers cut their mother's hair, they shaved it and said that she must sit on the floor for a number of days. Very humiliating conditions, and the children came out from abroad and they were not taking it. So it was very interesting. So this is a very interesting book. It is Echoes of Our Times, Another Place by Felicia Oyewadume. Very interesting book. Then I have Storms of Passion. It's about a doctor that had his own clinic and his wife, and that had an affair with a member of his staff, and how things did not all go well. So it's written by Wale. So it's written by Wale Okediran. It's written by Wale Okediran. It's a very interesting book. I really loved reading it as a younger person. So, and it's of the Lantern series. I read a lot of Lantern series growing up, a lot, an uncountable lot, if I do say so myself. So this is one of them. Then I have Pathfinder. Pathfinder is a book by Kola Oluke, Professor Kola Oluke of Ladoke Akitola University of Technology. This book was gifted to me by my French teacher, and I'd love to pass it to someone that will read it and find value. It's more of a Christian book. So the professor talks about science and about Christianity. So he talks about a lot of things, you know, the conglomeration of a lot of things that can benefit you in your everyday life. I remember that I read this book in secondary school, and there was a portion I read that I have not forgotten till today, where it talks about how when women have to make daily decisions on what to eat and all those kind of things around the house, those petty chores, you know, it stresses women. So there's something called toxins. They're harmful to the health. So when women are stressed like that, it releases those toxins into, you know, their body, or is it their brain now? So sometimes people don't look at that, and they wonder why a woman is snapping and getting angry all of a sudden and all of that. And then he also talked about his medical research into the cure for HIV/AIDS, you know, and all of that. So I think he's a professor of microbiology and biotechnology. So he mirrors science from a Christian perspective. He also teaches about Christianity too. So very important book, you know, very important. It's non-fiction, but he infuses some of his life experiences and stories along the way. I enjoyed reading this book when I read it. Very interesting book. Then I have The Whispering Trees, short stories, Abubakar Adam Ibrahim. Abubakar Adam contains a lot of interesting stories about women and their relations to men. That's what I took away from the story. So he's always talking about maybe this woman and her brother, this woman and her father, this woman and her lover, this woman widowed, her in-laws, and everything. Very interesting, everyday stories. So if you read it, you would enjoy it, I believe. And I have Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This book, hey, the literary appreciation that went on with this book when we were in secondary school. It's a very interesting book too. I've even watched the movie. I watched the movie about 6-7 years ago. So it's a very interesting book. A couple of English boys were caught on an island, stranded, and they had to fend for themselves and survive while they were desperately hoping that they would be found and rescued. So it became bloody. It's just how it's just a way of mirroring how a human society can quickly degenerate into chaos if care is not taken and there is no form of order or chain of command, you know, and how human greed and thirst for power can be very dangerous, and how people can really get desperate for it. It's a very good book. So it's not so interesting. It's not a book that sparks joy, so to speak, but it's a book that you'll be happy you read. Lord of the Flies by William Golding. It's a classic too, a very good classic. The Maestro, the Magistrate, and the Mathematician by Tendai Uchu. I did not finish reading this book, but I already got a glimpse of what was going on in there, because to an extent it was a difficult read for me, to be very honest now. So I'm hoping that whoever gets this book is going to enjoy it more than I did. But it's really just mirroring the lives of some Zimbabweans who left Zimbabwe in search of a better life in the UK, and how they experienced a lot of culture shock. You know, the story is told of a magistrate who went to the UK, and his wife was working, so he was a stay-at-home dad for a while, and he had to do chores around the house, things he would not even deign to do if he were in Zimbabwe, and how eventually took up work in a care facility, how his daughter was socialized the English way, and how he did not go down with them, you know. And a group of younger people. He was an older man, and then the book talks about younger people too, their struggles, you know, in England and all of that. So that's what the book is about. It's a book by Tendai Uchu. I saw Tendai Uchu at a books festival in 2016. He even photobombed one of my pictures on Olumo Rock. So whoever gets this, I hope you enjoy it and I hope you love it. Then I have Macbeth. I talked about this before, so this is the second one. Macbeth, William Shakespeare. It's just an abridged version, easy to read for children. Then I have Aki Goes to School, the classic of the century. This book is so good, so important to me that I borrowed someone this book in, I think, SS2 or SS1, and they did not return it. So what I did was, at some point when I found out that people had a tendency of borrowing books and not returning them, and books were very precious and important to me, I decided to be swapping books. So if you want to borrow my book, you have to give me a book in return that I will use as a security if you don't return it. So this book, I gave it to a friend that I made at a holiday lesson, and she gave me Marie Curie instead, the autobiography of Marie Curie. You know, the woman who developed the Polish woman, who won a Nobel Prize for her work in science. So, and developing atomic elements. So she did not return my Akin Goes to School. I still have a Marie Curie with me. I couldn't get through to her again. So, but I tried to reach out to her that, okay, give me my book, take this book. She couldn't return the book. Then we lost contact. So I still have a Marie Curie, but I went and bought another Akin Goes to School just because, you know, the first one was bought for me by my parents, but I had to go and buy this one with my own money just because. I've read this book about 4 times, if not more. It's a very interesting book of how Akin leaves the village, goes to school, and you know, his life in school. It was the days when you had to put your hand over your ear. You know, if you didn't touch, you weren't going to be admitted in school, and if you touched, then you were going to be admitted. It's a very interesting book. It's a book that mirrors the beginning of the academic life of a young boy. You know, it's just beautiful to read. If you read it, and if you read books from these GSS reader boosters, you know, there are different books. This book is even illustrated. It has pictures. This is Akin when he's going to school. His mother is hugging him and all of that. So it's a very interesting book. Akin Goes to School. I think most people know it in Nigeria if you talk about it. So whoever is getting this, you're getting a classic that is dear to my heart, and I'm passing the endearment and the value to you. Then I have 1984 by George Orwell, the writer of Animal Farm. So there's a book divider. I'm giving this book divider to one of my buyers, the person that bought Nearly All the Men in Lagos Are Mad. She's collected it absolutely to her. So I gave the person that bought the Domestication of Monarchy and My Vision, I gave the person a book divider. So the person that bought Nearly All the Men in Lagos Are Mad also has a book divider. I used to have a handful of these book dividers, and I didn't really think much of them because I don't even put them in my books. I generally just remember what I've read, and sometimes I use other things, you know, old habits die hard. So I'm passing this book divider to them. It's as good as news from Roving Heights. You know, it came with about 3 or 4 of them came with a pack of books that I bought at a time. So 1984 is a book about a totalitarian government. I hope to God that there was no government like that at any point in life, because it's a very scary thing. It was a time when, you know, they disappeared people that were anti-government. A time when, you know, the slogan was popular, Big Brother is watching you. So if you've heard that slogan or anything related, now this is the book where it comes from. It's a classic. It's a classic. Most lovers of literature have probably read this book once in a lifetime. It's an old book. So this one is by Penguin Publishers. I've had it for about 10 years or over 10 years. Yes, 1984 by George Orwell, Penguin Books. So it's a very interesting book. Whoever gets this, you're getting a classic, you're getting value. I hope you keep it. I hope you read it. I hope you understand it. So it was a time when the government punished everything and anything, including thought crimes. They say Big Brother is watching you. So whatever you think, the government already knows. So if you think anti-government, they pick you up, they disappear you. They tortured people, you know. They destroyed, you know, prints and records and documents. So if you had thought or you were planning something against the government, one day, the next day you could be gone, and all traces of you disappeared from human record and history. It's a very scary idea, but this book mirrors some of portions of what different countries of the world have experienced under a totalitarian ruler, you know. So it's not an ideal. I pray and hope that I never experience the totality of this book ever, or even a mirroring of it. I hope I never do. It's a very scary thing, but it's a very interesting read too. So if you read it, you'll enjoy it, especially if you have some political leanings, you know, and historical leanings too. So you can. It will also help you understand better, you know, the periods of Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, and all of that. So I believe this book emanated from that era. So read it and be blessed. Whoever gets this book, you're getting a big classic. Please take care of it. This is Love Does Not Win Election by Aisha Osori. It's a very good book. It's as good as you see how beautiful it looks. So this book is it's a book about the foray of Aisha Osori into Nigerian politics, and how she found out that it was not a love affair. It wasn't until you've been elected, you are not yet elected. Anything could happen along the process. And she helps you to mirror what you might experience and how to prepare for it if a woman trying to run for an electoral post in Nigeria. She talked about how she tried to get into a representative post and how she spent a lot of money and did not win at the end of the day because the party anoints a candidate and it's not necessarily a representation of the will of the party members or of the people. How there's a lot of rigging that goes on in the process, the electoral process, that makes sure that even sometimes the best candidates or the most sincere-minded candidates do not even get onto the ballot, talk less of being voted for. So it's a very interesting book if you're into politics or if you just want to have an idea of how politics is being done or run in Nigeria. This is the book to read. This is the book that underlines the statement and the idea and the belief that I have that Nigerian democracy, the practice of it, is too expensive. Too expensive. Love Does Not Win Elections. This one is by Narrative Landscape Press Limited. Then I have Hopes and Betrayals. I loved reading this book. It's by Matthew Adeta. It's a Lantern book. I really loved my dad bought me this book. I really loved reading it. So it's a very interesting book. It's about the love life of some young Nigerians. How someone was born into a born again Christian family, and they already had a relationship with someone that the family approved of, and how the relationship hit the rocks, and then they ended up getting pregnant out of wedlock for another person. So who was their friend's brother, and not too Christian in their family's understanding of things and in the basic understanding of things as well. So it's a book about young Nigerians, finding their footing in the society, trying to start a life post NYSC, and how things turned out for them. Very interesting book. Then I have On a Platter of Gold. I didn't finish reading this book. I read it, but I could not finish reading it, so I'm passing it out because for some reason, I don't know if I'm going to be able to commit to actually reading it. It's supposed to be about how Goodluck Jonathan lost the 2015 elections rather, and what went on with conceding defeat and all of that. So I hope that whoever reads it is able to understand it, probably share some value or creative conversation with me much later. It's by Bolaji Abdullahi. I'm passing it on because I've had it for about 6 years and I've not been able to finish it or commit to finishing it because finishing it is very small, a small fry if I actually commit to it. So I've sold My Vision by Mohammed bin Al Maktoum of Dubai or of Saudi Arabia. It's about how Saudi Arabia created a plan to develop its country, and they actually developed how the UAE rather, plan to develop the UAE, and they actually did it within a time frame, and their projections for the next few years and the nearest and the remote future. So it's a very interesting book. It's good for city planning, for country planning, and it's good to inspire and aspire, to develop one's country or one's life generally. I've sold it. I've also sold The Domestication of Munachi. It's a very beautiful book about a young girl that ran away on her marriage, on her wedding day, ran to the city in search of a better life, ran to her aunt who was not married and who she thought had a better life, whenever she came back to the village, and how she found out that life is not really a bed of roses and things are not as they seem. Then I've also sold Nearly of the Men in Lagos Are Mad. As the name implies, it's a collection of about 12 stories about mad men in Lagos. Mad men, sexually mad, and their sex lives generally, the cheating people, the gigolos, the rapists, the people with different sexual orientations who were lying to their partners about having a different orientation, or who were experimenting with different orientations and were, pretending to their partners, people who would sacrifice their spouses on the altar of pecuniary gain, the adulterers, the fornicators, so many wild things about the sexual lives of Lagos men and women, as the name implies. That's what's in the book. Then I've also sold How to Be a Nigerian, which is just a satire about different aspects of Nigeria and how to be a Nigerian. And when you read those things, you actually agree with Peter now that actually this is how Nigerians are. This is what we do and all of that, So I've sold that too. Then I have some log books here. I have Oil and Gas Law in Nigeria by Yinka Omorogbe. It's going to. I have Okonkwo and Nice Criminal Law in Nigeria. I have Law of Thoughts too by Kodinidi and Aluko, but I've not brought it over. This is the first batch in the stash that I'm selling. So if you're interested, you can reach out to me. Half of it have been paid for already, and they're going to be shipped this week, between this week and next week. And I'm moving over, the second batch for sale as well. This is Conflict of Laws, Themes on Conflict of Laws by Ayo Agbede. This is the Nigerian Land Law by Adewale Taiwo. I have the second edition of Law in Practice in Nigeria, Professional Ethics and Skills. This is for law school students. This is by A. Obiokwe. Obiokwe was a lecturer in law school, a very hilarious man. And then I had an A in Ethics, Professional Ethics and Skills. And then this is Property Law Practice in Nigeria, YY Dadem. I think I saw a 5th edition of this book already 2 days ago. Or was it yesterday? So this is YY Dadem. It was a DDG Law School, and it taught us property law practice too. So these are good books. I've read them. I had to. But if you're looking to build in your library, and especially for these two, if you're not too particular about the editions, because I'm aware that there are newer editions, I'd love to sell them off, so you get them. Those are two, but these ones, they are good for, I don't think there's any newer editions for this one, so if you want them, they're for sale, and they are for sale. So these are the first batch. I have some other books here, but they are not for sale. So it's not as if I'm selling all my books anyways. So that's all I want to talk about in this video for now. When I bring over my second stash, I'm going to do another video. So this is going to be a memory for me, keepsake, and it will be an insight, provide an insight into these books too. If you want to get them anywhere or get them from me, if I have not sold it or sold them by the time you watch this video. I love books, I love reading books. I've read a lot of books in this life, and I will still buy and read more books. Thing is, as I'm selling off these books, I'm already making a list of books that I want to buy again. So why hold it?